Thank you for joining me for this fourth and final small group discussion in our series on deconstructing apostasy or spiritual demolition. This is a study, as you recall, on authentic faith and an examination of the reason that some people turn from God, forsaking the faith that they once professed. The first week we talked about having true faith built on a solid foundation. And that solid foundation, of course, is Jesus Christ. The second week, we talked about what it means to build your life on sand, which is basically hearing but not doing. You have to do what Christ says in order to actually build on the foundation, which is Him. Then the third week, we talked about make-believers and fake Christians and how we're supposed to help people who are on the fence. They are fake Christians. They are make-believers, whether they know they are or not. How we can help them to pursue Christ and the dangers of what will happen to them if they don't pursue Christ, which, of course, is apostasy unless they die before their apostasy matures, you might say, which would be a horrible thing, of course. And then this past Sunday, I preached a message entitled, As Cities Burn, on corporate condemnation. And what we're talking about is what to do when whole groups turn away from God. And Sunday, I went through from 2 Peter chapter 2, I went through some things to watch for. This is a pattern that I see as I look at institutions and organizations and even families in my own experience, and certainly from history and from the Bible. Telltale signs that apostasy is on the way. We talked about false witnesses on Sunday, how somebody will start teaching an error, and then people will adopt that error. They'll start believing it and will abandon the fundamental truth that God has given, and then they will begin to disobey. So they'll wander into various sensual temptations. We talked about that Sunday. And then finally, God will warn of judgment to come. And then, of course, if there's no repentance, then apostasy is what ends up happening to that group. There are lots of different groups that we could talk about. In our small group discussion here, I've divided it up into 4 categories. There are nations that have had the truth and then gone astray. It can be something that happens to a family. A family can apostatize. It can happen to a congregation, that is to a denomination or to an individual church or both. And organizations, notoriously colleges, will be founded by good men who stand for the truth. And then as generations come and go, eventually the college will completely lose its way. And there's so many examples of that, but it happens to all kinds of organizations. And in your handout, you'll see some things that we can do, some things we should do in order to work against the apostasy of nations, families, congregations, and organizations. Then I used some case studies on the back side of your handout. There's some case studies here on examples of some churches that have gone astray. The Episcopalian Church is notoriously pro-gay now. The United Methodist Church has just pandered in so many ways to liberal politics and many anti-biblical stances. The Catholic Church has so many heresies and distractions and distortions in their theology and liturgy that it's nearly impossible to find the true gospel in their denomination. The various Pentecostal and charismatic groups, many of them have wandered far into the prosperity gospel movement. And you may say, well, you shouldn't name names. You shouldn't call out these organizations. That's not what we find in the scriptures. We're supposed to call out this error and supposed to call it for what it is. It doesn't mean we hate people, but there are organizations that have lost their way completely. And for us to pretend like they're still good organizations is foolishness, and it's not helpful, and it's not wise. So I'm not saying there are no Catholics that are saved, or no Pentecostals that are saved, or no Methodists that are saved. That's not what I'm saying. My mom was saved in the Methodist Church. But you got to go back, I mean, a long way to find a time when the Catholic Church had the gospel and was preaching the gospel. So with very few exceptions, those organizations have just lost their way completely. And, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 says that we're not supposed to yoke ourselves together with unbelievers. So have a discussion about the seriousness of this. What organizations are you aware of? I'll close with this. I can actually remember when the Boy Scouts, just a few years ago, was fighting for what was right concerning the basic morals of our culture and society. And within just a couple of years, they did a 180 and were actually going in the wrong direction. And the issue had to do with homosexuality, which, according to Romans chapter 1, is a telltale sign of apostasy. If you don't believe me, you need to read Romans chapter 1 and interpret it for yourself, because it's just as plain as day. That's the truth. So not only do individuals turn from God, but whole organizations turn from God. And we need to pray for our church and for our country that we don't lose our way completely, for sure. So take some time to discuss this handout. It's not a pleasant discussion, but it is one that's important and is needed.